Zen at the Sharp End. Welcome to the podcast about how to turn difficult people and relationships into your best teachers. I'm Mark Westmackett, a Zen Buddhist teacher, mindfulness teacher, and ex-professional astronomer. This is a podcast to go along with my latest book, Zen and the Art of Dealing with Difficult People, which is out now and available to order in all the usual places. In each episode, we'll be exploring different varieties of people, relationships, and situations that we find irritating, difficult, or painful. Together with a number of Zen friends, I'll be discussing how the practices of Buddhism and mindfulness can help us see our difficult people as troublesome Buddhas, our greatest teachers. This podcast is sponsored by Zen Minded, an online lifestyle store offering you the very best in Japanese craft, incense, and other Zen-inspired home goods. Check it out at www.zenminded.uk. Oh, well, hi, Mel. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I wonder if perhaps you could start off by talking us through a little bit your background in Zen and how you came across Zen in the first place.
So I kind of I guess I stumbled into Zen. So probably about, I think it was maybe about 2011. I went and had this thing called, it was kind of like brain training. So they stuck electrodes to your head and then kind of ran you through a sequence of protocols, and they discovered that I pretty much wasn't paying attention any of the time. So I had a pretty traumatized brain picture by the look of it. So he kind of, was running me through some protocols, and then he said, do you want to do some alpha theta training? And I was like, yeah, whatever. So basically he told me to close my eyes, and then I heard my brain. So I heard the alpha waves and I heard the theta waves. And I kind of closed my eyes and I started seeing all these visions. Nothing was, I thought I'd fallen asleep and I was dreaming. So, I kind of saw myself climbing out of the ground and going to beaches and meeting people that, from my past, that kind of thing. And when I opened my eyes, everything was different. So I was in the same place, but, the world was brighter, smells were more vivid, tastes were more vivid. And afterwards, I had a lot of energy, and I didn't really understand what had happened. But he said that from looking at my brain pattern, I wasn't sleeping, I was meditating. So I'd never meditated before. And after that,
was there any guidance? Did he give you any guidance, or just...
No, there was none. He basically just said, close your eyes and we'll see what happens. So it was quite interesting, but I thought, how can I keep this? What is this actually? And he said, well, you might want to look at something called mindfulness. So I kind of researched mindfulness and joined a master's program, as you do when you've never and then someone else said, well, perhaps you'd like to join the Zenways program as well. So I started my master's on one weekend and I did my Zenways mindfulness teacher training the following weekend.
Wow. Yeah.
So and from there I kind of, when I met Daizan, he kind of seemed like the real deal. He seemed very genuine and interesting. And as I started to do my mindfulness practice, I noticed that my kind of, I guess, the way that I saw the world and the way that I interacted with other people, I kind of was leaning towards Buddhist practice, I suppose. And I asked Daizan, probably about a year later, could I maybe become a Buddhist? And then, from then on. Yeah.
And when was that then?
So that was probably about 2012. That was.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, so a good 10 years then, yeah.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. And do you remember in all of that, do you remember the first time when you came across this phrase, troublesome Buddhas?
I think the first time I heard troublesome Buddhas was when I heard you say it. I don't think I'd ever heard that, but what I'd learned kind of around the time that I was doing the brain training was that people come into our lives to teach us lessons about ourselves. And then what I kind of learned, well, what I've realized through all of it, that if there is one person that's a troublesome Buddha, it's me.
Right.
Like I'm the common denominator, and it seems to be that, I don't think anyone comes into my existence to cause problems for me, but it's my reaction to them and it's my reaction to the situation that causes the problem for me. So that's kind of my take on the whole thing. But it takes me a while to get it. So sometimes, for years I held on to grudges with people because I thought that they were the problem. And then, when I realized that actually, they were maybe doing it because of love or because of concern, or maybe they just weren't skillful, or maybe I wasn't skillful. There were lots of factors involved, and it doesn't take me as long to get the lesson now. A little bit quicker.
So, and do you remember, like, you said when you were doing your brain training, that was kind of right at the beginning, then you got a sense of the fact that people were there teaching you things about the way you were. Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty kind of like getting that side of things pretty quickly then.
Yeah, it took me a while. So that was because I suppose when you first realize that maybe you're the problem, there's a moment where you want to kind of turn away from that. So that's what I did. It was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to face my part in this situation. And then there's like a turning away. I don't want to, because it's not me, it's them. And then it was kind of a gradual kind of turning back around and, okay, I can do this. So it took a little while. Like it took sort of months. And I think that the first session that I went to was extremely hard because that was when I first started seeing that I was part of the problem. It was just like, oh no, like this is awful, in meditation. And then you just kind of seeing these images of things that you've done or when you've reacted or whatever. And it was.
How were those images? They were just spontaneously arising, or was there some kind of, I mean, you say training. So what was the training?
Well, so the brain training was just the way it worked. You watched movies, and what would happen is the EEG would pick up. It was a movie, say The Notebook. So that's a devastatingly sad movie. So you're kind of watching The Notebook, and when something happens in the movie, you get an emotion and a thought, and you're trained to follow that thought. So to notice the emotions, so you're getting the mindfulness. I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, lonely, whatever. And then you're following the thought. So I felt sad, which made me think of this and that and that. So it's kind of like mindfulness while being awake, I suppose, and watching a movie. It was very strange. But
just kind of increasing your awareness, your presence with things that are going on internally. Okay.
Yeah, specifically your emotions. And because, as I said, my brain, when I started, I wasn't present with any of that. I was kind of, the kind of person that would try and read a magazine while driving, like really wasn't present with any of it. Right. So yeah, like I think, and when I went to session, it was, silence, and we're just
the
doing
Zen retreat.
Yeah. And we're doing our our Zen meditation, so practice of presence mostly. So that's all I was doing, and then images were coming up or situations or thoughts, and then it was just like, oh no. So it was like the penny was dropping constantly, and that was that was hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like, I guess, sounds a bit like things were sort of unraveling or unwinding within your like openness, within the presence that you offered. Things were just arising, and you were able to see things more clearly as time went on. Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes it was hard. So you'd see something and it was quite shocking, but that was when you can, you go and speak to Daizan and just, and he'd say, well, the first time you see it, it's shocking, and then the next time you see it, it's not so bad. And it's true. It's like, well, okay, yeah. So you've seen it. What can you do now?
Yeah. So what were the sort of main troublesome issues that have come up for you then over the years? Troublesome people, situations. Yeah.
Usually relationships with family have always been tricky. And I suppose they've been more tricky because I've been away from my family for 20 years this year.
Right.
So family's in Australia, they're living their life, they're growing and evolving. And I'm over here completely separate, growing and evolving. And so each time I go home, we're kind of meeting each other for the first time again, and that's difficult. So when I went home, I think it was about 7 years ago, I'd been doing a lot of compassion practice for my master's, and so you've got all these feelings of love, and you're in love with everyone in the world, and you've got this kind of, you're living in this compassionate bubble, and you've got these feelings of love towards everyone, your family. So of course I was very excited to be going home and meeting them and spending time with them. And in my mind, we had such a wonderful relationship, and everything was perfect. And then when I got home, everything was what it had been years ago. And I'd changed, but they hadn't. And so it was very tricky, like, why are they treating me like this? Like, what have I done? What's going on? They must hate me, blah, blah, blah. And just going through the whole drama. And it took about a week of real angst, like not understanding like why my family were acting the way they were, when in actual fact they were just acting the way they always had. But because I hadn't been there, I'd forgotten. And I didn't realize until I got to the airport and I was going home, and I think an airplane had crashed that morning, and it was I think it was like one of the Malaysian airline ones, and I was flying Malaysian Airlines.
Oh gosh.
I convinced myself I was going to die in this airplane, and there was a lot of turbulence, and I was like, God, this is, I'm just going to die, and they all hate me. But then I realized, like, I was talking to my mom, and she said something that she usually says, one of her offhand comments, probably commented about my weight or something like that. And I kind of went, oh, and I thought, God. But then I went, well, actually, she doesn't know any better. She's always done that. That's her. And that's, she's always done that. And then I kind of realized, well, my dad's always done that, because it was my dad that I was having the difficult relationship with. And then the penny dropped, and I just went, well, I've actually projected my stuff. So even like a projection doesn't have to be bad all the time, even the good projection. So my projection of a perfect relationship with my dad, I projected that onto him the whole week.
Right.
And when the reality wasn't meeting my projection of what it should have been, that was what was causing the suffering. And as soon as I realized that actually I'd projected that onto him, he had no part in it. He was just being him, So I'd kind of, that was me. And I just thought, Yeah, well, that's a nice lesson. And it was a good thing, before I got onto the plane and potentially died, that I'd kind of come to peace with that.
Gosh, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
sounds like a really sort of turbulent visit home.
Yeah.
Maybe the
Well,
aeroplane just reflecting some of that.
exactly. No, it was but it was good to kind of realize that, and it's just, but it's something that I'm recognizing a lot, when I'm meeting other people. And I'm a nurse, so I'm constantly meeting people in their worst times.
Mm,
They can't help it. They're doing their very best, and especially patients. It's not their responsibility to make me feel good about like our interaction. You just kind of have to meet them where they are, and try your very best not to project your stuff onto them.
yeah, yeah.
Without being clean in your interactions. And I think one thing that's helped with that has been, you know, when we do our dyad work,
Yeah. Mm,
kind of, it's just understanding, okay, well, I'm hearing that. How am I feeling about that? And then just owning your stuff and knowing.
mm, mm. Yeah, it reminds me of this instance in when Joe, my wife, and I, when we first got together, and um, I remember she'd been out for a weekend with some friends, and when she got back, we were talking about what she got up to, and she described something in the weekend that was outside of what I had, projected her to be, the kind of person, the kind of things that I thought she liked and I thought she didn't like. She said she described something which was outside of that, and it's so easy, isn't it? So easy to, I don't know what you word, like thingify a relationship, to basically project and fix it into an expectation or a project, as you say, projection or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's constant. I think, you know, I feel very sorry for my husband, because we're constantly learning from each other, and it's something that, when, like, it's a fantastic opportunity to grow as an individual, but also as a couple. But you are constantly kind of putting your stuff on these other people, and you've got to be responsible for, you know for what you're doing there, because
Mm.
you can potentially damage someone or hurt someone
Right,
quite
right,
badly.
right. Yeah, and have you found some over the years, with your husbands, of particular
Yeah,
issues or things that have come up?
yeah, I think so. But he's like, I'm very, very fortunate, because he's not a reactionary person. Like, he doesn't react like I would. And
Mm,
so,
mm,
because I can be quite hot-headed, um, and I'm just very lucky that he's incredibly kind, and he just kind of sits back, probably because he's just, he doesn't want to make a wrong move, and he just kind of sits back and then waits for me to realize what I've done, and then I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sorry. Like, I've just projected that onto you.
uh,
I'm really sorry. And he's like, right, okay. And then he's sort of like a scared animal, just waiting for me to realize what I've done. And then,
but also, what a wonderful way to respond, to give the space for you
yeah,
to sort of self-reflect and and make a correction or whatever, repair to the situation.
yeah, I'm very fortunate that he allows me to do that. But it's also lucky. I think it's lucky that I get it. And as I said, I think I'm
Mm,
getting it quicker than I used to.
mm,
That's for sure. Because I probably, you know, years ago, in a previous relationship, I could have held a grudge for months, and never admitted that I was wrong. It just wasn't something that I did. And now it's like, well, actually, no, I can put my hand up and say I've made a mistake here, and I'm
mm.
sorry. And I
So,
think,
what I'd be interested to hear what you think about the process. Like, let's say in this, your husband comes home, you say some things,
yeah,
he sits back and he's waiting for you to reflect. What is that process that happens there, and how do you find it becoming quicker and quicker? What's the changes?
yeah. Well, I need space, so I have to go to another room or something, and then I can then I have to think, like, what am I feeling here? Why am I feeling this?
Oh, so kind of like taking yourself out of the situation. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have to, because if I'm there, I'm too likely to react, I think.
Mm.
And I still don't want to admit that I've made a mistake. So I have to actually go, even if it's to the kitchen or something, and do something different. And then it's like suddenly the penny drops. It's like, oh God, oh,
Yeah.
me, I've done this. Like, I've just projected that onto you, and I'm so sorry. Like, that was me. And
Mm.
quite often it's that, so I've got high expectations of myself, and he's just living his individual life, and then he might not do something the way that I would do it, so I get annoyed that he hasn't done what I would do, but actually that's just me projecting that onto him. It's just like, and
Mm.
then I'm like, I'm really sorry, that's my stuff, it's not yours at all. So
Mm. Mm. So would you be willing just to kind of look at this? So you take yourself into another room,
yeah.
and then what's your so what happens at that point then?
So I first of all try and identify what I'm feeling. Am I hurt? And usually there's like an element of shame
Uh-huh.
because I've reacted. So I kind of identify what I'm feeling, and then I just kind of sit with that feeling and then wait for, you know, why did and then I might ask, why did I react like that? Like, what is actually going on here?
Mm.
And then it usually comes to, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. And then
Mm.
immediately I go, right, well, actually,
Mm.
that's my stuff, not his,
Mm.
because, he did what he did, and that's nothing, it's not mine to
Mm.
own,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, yeah.
So interesting, isn't it? Yeah, just kind of like being present with your thoughts and feelings, particularly feelings, you say, like just being
Yeah.
really present and sort of examining what's arising. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you said you get to sense that earlier and earlier, or quicker and quicker as time has gone on? So
Yeah.
like you think it's just becoming practiced at that?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's actually, I think the most important thing is that I'm not afraid to admit that I've made a mistake
Uh,
or that I'm the problem.
mm.
In fact, actually, it's almost like I expect it now. I'm like, I'll just, it's me. Of course, it's me. I've done it again. Yeah, I put my hand
Mm.
up.
Mm. Mm.
So I think that's the most important thing, is not being afraid to admit that I'm not perfect. You know, yeah, I
Mm.
think but actually, my husband's quite gracious in that he lets me kind of be that. You know,
Mm. Mm.
there's
Mm.
no expectation from him that I'm perfect either. Like,
Yeah,
I think he knows.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Mm. And so I wonder if, so there are definitely times, I know for myself, definitely times where, I am very much part of this troublesome situation. I have a strong role to play. I've contributed towards this. But there are definitely times I can think of where it really isn't me.
Yeah.
And, other people are being, okay, so they are pressing some buttons in you, but do you have, I mean, do you get a sense of the difference there, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I see it all the time, especially working where I'm working. Like, I work in intensive care, and you've got different personalities. So,
Mm.
surgeons, or, that can be so incredibly rude
Mm.
and kind to other surgeons or to other staff. And, that as an observer is unacceptable.
Mm.
But sometimes, like, the only thing in that situation, because I can't challenge a surgeon, I could, but I'd probably get into trouble for it. Um, then you have to use compassion. Like, that person is obviously suffering for some reason that they can't, react in a different way, and they choose to berate someone, and you can only be compassionate in that situation. And if you can't be compassionate to them, then I'm super compassionate to the person that they are talking to,
Uh,
because they're
uh,
needing that just in that moment. So yeah, and I think, sometimes patients, like, I had a patient who, he was a drug user, and he was very sick. So, but I've been in a relationship with someone who's been on drugs before, so a lot of my buttons were being pushed, and I really didn't want to look after this guy. And he was just being awful. He was like shouting at us, and he was calling us names, but then apologizing. But I actually, I had to understand that in that situation, he was pushing my buttons because he reminded me of someone that I once knew. But I had to rise above that and just understand that he was absolutely terrified. And then he also had the stigma of being a drug user, and he was trying to fight people being prejudiced against him because of that. And then it was, I just had to explain to him, just forget about that. That's not why you're here. You're here because your heart's sick. So let's deal with that. Just forget about the drug thing for a moment. We'll just deal with this. And, it was difficult, but it was just having to understand that, I was being triggered, but I had to be compassionate, had to be compassionate and kind. So I think, that's the only way that I think works. And if you can't be compassionate and kind to the person that's displaying those behaviors, then you have to be kind and compassionate to yourself, for feeling like you want to hit them in the head or something, So, I think that's, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like it's amazing. It sounds amazing to be able to come into that space where you're able to see past some of the superficial behaviors, see beneath some of that stuff, and almost like respond to the person that's the kind of deeper underneath, and then bring compassion to that. I mean, it's what an amazing opportunity to be able to do that.
Well, it hasn't always been like that, so I'm very grateful that I'm at that stage now where it is, So because it used to be quite difficult to deal with lots of different patients because you took it all very personally, but none of it's personal. That's the thing, because everyone's fighting their own battle.
Yeah, I wonder if someone wanted to be more compassionate, what would be your advice? How do I be more compassionate?
Well, I think I learned a great deal from doing compassion practices specifically, because it didn't come naturally to me to be a compassionate person. Like, I was kind, but the compassion was different. So, because I suppose my parents, I knew that they loved me, they cared for me, but we weren't the kind of family that would embrace each other and display love and affection. So it was kind of difficult to do the compassion practices. But I think that kind of doing the metta practice is very good. And I did a retreat with Zenways a couple of years ago. I think it was maybe 3 or 4. No, it was 2 before I got married. And it was actually probably a good time to do that retreat, actually, the compassion retreat. And, there were some brilliant practices from the Zen school that I'd never actually heard about, because I've always kind of done the Tibetan meditation practices, but the Zen ones were really beautiful. So I think that, it's possible to do that, because it's like a muscle. It's like with meditation, our mindfulness in meditation, we kind of have to build that muscle of mindfulness. And I think that you have to kind of build the muscle of compassion as well, because especially in this day and age with social media, it's very easy to be judgy and to kind of, you want to kind of, people are constantly putting other people on show and showing their worst traits, but we're not getting the whole picture. And maybe we need to just be coming at those people with love, like, because that's what they need.
Yeah. So like a muscle, training our practice of compassion in sort of maybe in times when it's not so turbulent, and then we can bring it to bear in times that are a bit more emotionally difficult.
Absolutely. And see, that's a good point actually, Mark, because when you are going through particularly hard times, you shouldn't be doing the compassion practices anyway, because sometimes people who are perhaps perfectionists or a little bit critical of themselves can't find that compassion if they're going through a hard time. They just can't. And it's too much of an ask. So they should just go back to their, I would probably even say the focuses should be on the breath, something solid, so the mind doesn't get a chance to wander and criticize. But yeah, when I think, when things are quiet, the compassion practices are great. They really are. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, such a variety of different examples and stories and things. I really thank you so much for being willing to bring these and be so honest and talk about them with us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review and a star rating on whatever platform you use. And do recommend it to others, because we all have difficult people in our lives, and each of them offers us a real opportunity for learning and growth. For more information about my book and what else I offer, head over to my website, markwestmackett.co.uk. Thanks so much for listening. Bye for now.